Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Songs of Silence. That's the game that we're going to be having a look at today under my sort of traditional overview format. All bets are off at the moment because we've got the Steam summer sale, I suppose. So for the next 2 weeks, pretty much anything you can think of is on deep discount. So I might actually go a bit hard in the paint. Let's see what people think feedback-wise and pump out some videos on this and the second channel just to shout out all the cool games that I recommend that are on the cheap. And to kick it all off, we're actually going to start with Songs of Silence. I mentioned this in a previous video where I was breaking down, reviewing, etc. We don't need to retread, you can check that out. But one of the games that I was just quietly chipping away at on the side that I never really had an opportunity to shout out under the strict review format was this. I actually missed it when it first came out a year ago, and I just, on a whim, procrastinating, I picked this up and put in, well, at this point now, I've probably put about 4 or 5 hours in, actually, because it's really got its claws in me. And yeah, ordinarily, this format would be just 2 hours, having a look at a game in the Steam refund window. We have a whole spiel around it. But yeah, in this case, I have been engrossed with this game. It has really captured me. And it doesn't hurt that at the time of this recording and putting this video up, it's on, I think, half price because of the Steam sale. So if you find this interesting, check it out. What is Songs of Silence? Well, pedigree-wise, Chimera Entertainment, I don't really know them. They might have done one obscure release before, but it's a very polished final product for, you know, a kind of first out of the gate. This could be best described as an auto-battler version of something like a Heroes and Might and Magic type game. Which, funnily enough, and, you know, don't hate me too much, I don't have the best nostalgia for those. I played them growing up and they were cool because they're so unique, but most people that remember them incredibly fondly, and I'm just like, well, I went through the motions and played them because they were there, and I appreciate the fun that I did have with those games. I think just the formula gets a little bit long in the tooth. It suffered from very early signs of what 4X games suffer from in the late game, where it turns into a bit of a tedium steamroll, and you go through the motions. Who's to say if this does the same thing? I can't really speak to that, but the main difference between those sort of comparisons is this is arguably a bit more simplified or streamlined, at least in the early hours, moving around the open world map, interacting with other armies, taking over bases, and, you know, you've got some rudimentary resources to upgrade the level of bases so they then generate better economy. So there's a little bit of that, and building out buildings and recruiting troops from bases, but it is actually fairly simple, but not in a bad way. It actually is refreshing to essentially play one of these larger, bordering on 4X type scale strategy type games, but having it more streamlined, less mechanically burdensome, and they've got a cool narrative going on with this interesting sort of tumultuous inter-kingdom drama. I mean, I'm loath to say Game of Thrones, but that's the touchstone for everyone. But on the side of it, you have like this idea, the silence. Everyone has a song. You know, I'm still only really surface level on it, but there's these kind of big bads that you don't go near. These silent dudes in the silent area. But through, you know, intrigue and mischiefs visited upon you, you have to take your people and sort of run into the unknown, and, you know, that's sort of how you start your expedition journey, tutorial even. But all this leads into essentially hopping from castle to castle or little base or whatever, and then picking fights and trying to come out the better for it. As far as the combat goes, you have like your hero unit, and in the campaign you start with 2. You got the main chick character, this queen in exile type Sheila, but she's kind of like a knight, so she's on horseback, and you've got this spellcaster sidekick dude. He's a bit like Gandalf actually, and they can each have their own armies, and obviously they have their own skills. Cavalry charges in one, the other one has like summons, and depending on their current level, as they level up, they'll unlock the ability to slot extra units. And it's as simple as you go into a town, you spend the gold that you get per turn, you slot the units in. They have like a reserve bench, and units do have death permanency and health bars amongst their little foot troopers. So say you do have like a little unit of, I don't know, they're like footmen, 16 footmen or something like that, and you go into a biff, they're probably going to come out half, you know, cut up, dudes missing, or guys with half a health bar, which will regenerate over time, and if you sit in a base, that sort of thing. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. But yeah, the meat of it is this, and all you really do is when you prep your army outside of combat, you just put your units in their different squares, and when you square up against an enemy army, it just auto battles. They start attacking closest targets, and you'll have archers and cavalry that charge, and there is some nuance in there. I haven't had to really worry about it too much, but I do just enjoy the spectacle of watching all the units beat the crap out of each other. And then you'll have like hero abilities. You might be able to summon some dudes or even bring guys off the bench because you have a reserve behind your army, which is pretty helpful. And kind of you get into total war army management on the main world map and swapping your units in and out of who's in the kind of active roster. So it does that quite well. But yeah, I'm just roundly impressed with the overall experience and the spectacle and watching the auto battler thing play out. And in a way, the battle's kind of already decided before you go, but by the units that you've got in the front lineup and how strong they are, and potentially the matchups of the enemy army if you're able to scout them out. And I can't help but wonder, even though I do really enjoy this world building that they're doing here, this weird songless, faceless people and the art style, it's really quite interesting. But this mechanic would lend itself so incredibly well to like Warhammer 40,000, or actually probably Warhammer Fantasy Old World, right? Maybe Age of Sigmar, I guess. But while you are kind of grounded in the human side and you're going into this unknown up against these mystical monsters of the silence, it's run a whole gamut of wild stuff that they've thrown at me, from giant like mushroom tree men that summon things and goblin looking things riding boars, and it covers all the bases that you would kind of want from a high fantasy simulated battle. Doesn't outstay its welcome. They're actually quite punchy and quite quick. And it would be remiss of me not to mention the soundtrack. I'm actually a huge audiophile. We've discussed this before, the state of YouTube being that I have to be very careful what audio I even play anywhere, because people might claim it 3 years from now, who knows. But behind the presentation as a gamer, soundtracks are actually really important to me. I love them to death, and they can, in my opinion, actually carry a product pretty heavily if you get the soundtrack right. And this stands out as distinctly wonderful. It's got this like I can't really hum it because whatever, but it has a unique theme woven through all the audio tracks, and it sticks with you. And this is something of a modern phenomenon. I know I've seen videos on YouTube about it before, where like the art of even music soundtracks in a lot of modern movies, they don't really make these memorable thematic overtures, not as much as you might remember from back in the day. And the same can be said for video games. You don't get things like the Halo theme suite that everybody knows. If you started humming songs from the main Halo series, most people will recognize it, right? And while this is small scale, right, this is definitely a smaller indie game, I think it's just really wonderful that if you were to later on in life play me a snippet of this audio track, I would recognize it immediately, because it's just really quite unique and wonderful and carries that fantasy vibe that you actually really want from not just this game, but like all your games. Anyway, I thought it bore meditating on that for a moment. So yeah, as a game that I just thought, bugger it, I'll give it a go, out of season, chipping away while I procrastinate on reviewing, I've become quite smitten with this game, and I plan to put many more hours into it if possible. Anyway, look, check it out. Let us know what you think. If you've got any suggestions for games to cover during this sales season, drop me a comment, let me know, because I'm thinking about actually ramping for the next 2 weeks, just to, embrace the seasonal sale and do my best to shout out what I think are cool things worth having a look at. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.